What up, perps? King Copious, back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? Repping America, the center, and common sense. Boy, do we need a little more common sense. Yeah, we got a lot to cover, so let's get this thing going. If you found the debates to be disgusting, well, this one's for you. Betty Pop's back. Take two. Baby. Man, did I massacre my attempts yesterday. I tried to save it in the editing bay, but some things are beyond hope. So, before we get into, obviously, talking about the debate and other things, just a quick refresher here. A decade of untruths, adding up the media's lies about Trump and Biden. The public is exhausted after a decade of chronic untruth from the left wing and its media. I know that there are a lot of untruths that go out into social media, but when it's coming from places like the LA Times, New York Times, ABC, CNN, those are way worse, because those are the ones that we sort of have been conditioned to believe that these are trusted sources. And when they act the way they've been acting, we lose that faith. We have nobody whose focus is the truth. It's their truth, what truth they want to bring out to us. And it's a very dangerous thing, and I think it's created the violent, nobody talking to anybody landscape that we see nowadays. Started in the 2016 presidential campaign, where they had the false allegations against Trump that the Russians were trying to influence the election. It was based on the Steele dossier. And when Hillary Clinton and the Democrats lost, they declared him an illegitimate president. So they pushed for a special investigation. And, of course, we'd all know the investigation found that the Steele dossier was just made up. And they knew this. But they ran with it. And the media didn't hold them accountable. They claimed that he pressured the Ukrainian government to look into the family of Joe Biden. But then it turns out Hunter Biden was paid nearly $1 million by a Ukrainian energy company to enlist his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, for quid pro quo service. So they get the story wrong. The truth of the matter is that it looks more like Biden's in bed. They cover it up. They contextualize it. The truth of the matter is Biden himself had bragged that he pressured Ukraine to fire its prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, because he was getting too close to the family. They covered these things up, which, again, that could have affected the election. Then on the eve of the first 2020 debates, Biden aide, now Secretary of State, Blinken, helped round up 51 former intelligence authorities to claim that Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop was fabricated by the Russians. And they already knew that it was genuine. They already knew that. And then the very same FBI that didn't come forward and say, hey, the laptop and the contents of the laptop have been verified, which again would have affected the 2020 election. Don't know how it would have affected it, but we know it would have affected it. People would have had a different view of Joe Biden. Then, of course, the FBI then went to Silicon Valley social media companies, right? We know this happened to suppress accurate news accounts of the laptop's embarrassing contents. The very paper that I'm quoting right now, they were taken off of social media. And nobody ever came out and took credit or, took the credit that the punishment, I guess, for it. They never apologized for lying. And if it was an attempt to alter the election, it worked. Now, I know people on the left are going to say, oh, good, hey, we got to stop Trump at all costs. But that's something that the media has created. What did Trump do in his 4 years that was so bad for this country? Where was the actual threat to democracy? There was no threat to democracy. It's the left. It's the media. Those are the people who are threatening democracy. You hear it all the time that the more suspicious somebody is of their partner, the more likely it is that that suspicious person is actually the one who is committing the affair. We know that the louder people scream about their opponents, the more likely it is that they themselves are the ones who are actually guilty of it. It's called deflection. And then, during the Democratic primaries and throughout the first 3 years of the Biden administration, lots of people, myself included, were going, what the hell is wrong with Brandon? Yet, that whole administration, all of the people in that political party, the Democrats, and the media insisted we were wrong, that Biden was vigorous and sharp, that we had nothing to worry about. So then they got, through the primaries, and now it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Oh no, in June, when the debates went south, they immediately turned on Biden and used the media to now vilify this man until he had to drop out of the race. And they were able to then just put in Kamala Harris, which is what they wanted. In some, this article says, for some 9 years, the media and the left have successfully fed the country a succession of rank deceptions and conspiracies. They did. They've called Trump Hitler. They've called him a racist. They've never offered up any proof. And as they continue, they have all but destroyed democracy, ruined the reputation of the media, alienated the public, and embarrassed their country before the world. We're being lied to by the media. And this one to me sums it up. This is from Blair White. I haven't featured her in a while. If Trump was going to destroy America, he would have done it in his first term. If Kamala Harris was going to help America, she would have done it in her first term. Where are the questions about that? Where is the media on these subjects of some of these failures of the Biden administration, the failures of Kamala Harris? The fact that she couldn't even get enough votes to make it into the primary, that she is the least liked vice president ever. Half of her party had turned on her. But now the party decides that she's the one. That's what they want to do. They're gonna get that first at all costs. So on to the debate. Babylon Bee. They really know how to sum it up, don't they? Nation eagerly anticipates two brightest minds in country meeting in respectful, productive dialogue. Yeah. And where was it? It was on ABC. One of the moderators, David Murrow, it shows it right here. 100% positive coverage on Harris. 93% negative on Trump. It would be a different story if you would struggle to find something about Harris. But she is a condescending dummy. She talks down to people. She talks in literal word salads. She has no plan. And even if she follows the Democrats' plan, that's just 4 more years of what we've just seen. They can make up excuses for the economic hardships right now by blaming COVID. But what about the world spiraling out of control? What about the American hostages being held by Hamas right now? But this is how it's portrayed, that Kamala Harris is going to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. And we already knew that once it was on ABC, that wasn't going to happen. And it really did not happen. David Murrow and Lindsey Davis are particularly under criticism for their one-sided fact-checking. There you go. That's what it was. This comes from a former ABC News political director, Mark Halperin. He called it the biggest failure of the night. He was vocal about the network safeguarding Harris. We can't have our media safeguarding their preferred candidate. That is propaganda. The government doesn't even have to tell these people to do it. They're going to do it. Halperin went on to say, not only was one news organization fully on board to continue through Election Day, protecting her at all costs, but we saw in the coverage of the debate, which was laughably uneven, no recognition that it was laughably uneven. The whole story now is, oh, no, it was fair, and Trump failed. Trump lost. Harris won. Yeah, of course, it was a rigged match. Moderators called timeout to huddle and discuss strategy with Kamala. That was about how it was. It's summed up right here. Look, bringing on other cartoonists now, other than Bronco. President Trump, you'll be fact-checked 5 times during the debate. Vice President Harris, you will not be fact-checked, so tell us some whoppers. They allowed her to avoid answering any of their questions, and they did not call her out for any of her failures, any of her shortcomings, any of her plan. Nothing was put on display. A great example of that was they asked Trump, do you regret anything that happened on January 6th? He answers, I didn't tell them to do that, and I wasn't in charge of security. Then the moderator, he comes back with, sure, but is there anything you regret? They pressured him on something that really had nothing to do with his presidency. If people were grown-ups, they would realize that we used those mail-in ballots for the first time, and it made people nervous. People couldn't understand why their president, who really didn't do anything that bad, I don't know what it is. If it's there, put it in the comments. Please let me know, because I honestly don't know what Trump did that was so bad. But yes, things on January 6th got out of hand. But is that all they've got? And it was not the same when Harris was asked, were people better off now than they were 4 years ago? She didn't even answer that question. And they didn't press her on it. They didn't say, no. We asked you, are people better off? No. They just let her ramble on. Where were the questions about when she supported the Minnesota bail fund that ended up bailing out murderers and criminals? Where's the questions about her reactions to saying things like, I'll never take a vaccine that was developed by Donald Trump? You know, did you change your mind? What changed your mind about taking the vaccine? No, there were no questions about that. No questions about the fact that she locked people up for smoking weed, and then when she was asked if she smoked weed, she started cackling. There was no follow-up or questions about her time as borders are. But for Trump, there were 6 interruptions, 4 fact checks. They didn't correct Kamala Harris when she said there were no troops in harm's way, which there are. They didn't fact check her when she repeated the lies about Charlottesville or the bloodbath. No. But yeah, hands up, yeah, Trump fell into her traps. But traps don't solve anything. Where's the plan? They have a plan to get her elected. And that's it. That's all they want. They want to say, look, we got the first woman president, and she's mixed race, and all of these other kudos and gold stars and woke points for everybody. But if we sink another 4 years into a failed plan that we already know is a failed plan, who wins? You know, earlier I mentioned Trump fell into traps, and she would bait him. But he didn't do himself any favors, okay? Straight up. That shit about eating cats in Ohio was the stupidest shit I've ever heard. I saw that story. I looked into that story. That story didn't have legs, so I didn't bring it here, all right? What I would bring here is how does it work when you have a town of 60,000 people, then you add 20,000 people suddenly over the course of just a few years? The Biden administration, their little parole plan, flying Haitians. Doesn't matter that they're Haitians. It doesn't matter what country they come from. Adding 20,000, adding a 30-year population in a relatively short term is going to create chaos. And now their services are backed up. Their funding is being stretched. Where was the plan? Because all they wanted was the people in the country. They didn't give a shit how those people were going to live. The big issue in that Ohio town is that the Haitians who have now gotten driver's license aren't very good drivers. They perform random U-turns. They turn right out of the left turn lane. It's our way of driving has not quite clicked with them yet. And there have been several fatalities. Trump had legitimate ammunition that he could have used, and instead he talked about eating cats. And that's his fault. That's his fault. But what concerns me, like Gary Callahan says here, gee, I wonder who impartial moderator Lindsey Davis is voting for. The problem is, I myself wanted to be a journalist. And I've always prided myself on being able to look at things the devil's advocate point of view. And I've had to change my mind on things. But one of the biggest things I ever had to change my mind on was gay marriage. I was against it. But when I heard the arguments for it, I changed my mind. Because that's what we are supposed to be doing in this country. We are supposed to try to remain neutral and look at both sides and vote for candidates who are going to do a good job. Not people like Kamala Harris, who has no business being in the White House. The Democrats have no business being in the White House. Bronco sums it up right here. Kamala yelling at the drowning man. You're fine. He's lying to you. 3+ years of Harris policies. Look at Trump's administration. Forget inflation. Forget the economy. Remove that. And you still see that Trump and the Republicans had a much better plan. Letting 11 million illegal immigrants in here, no matter how you want to classify them, is not a good idea. We have a housing crisis. We have homeless crisis. We have drug crisis. We have the ongoing, the ever-present gang crisis. And their border policies and their border schemes have created untold damage. We will not see the full result of the border policies for several more years, and it will just continue to get worse and worse and worse. You don't let entire prison gangs into your country and get away with it. You don't solve a housing crisis by bringing in more people. You don't solve food prices by bringing more people in here. Our social services are stretched thin. I mean, hell, California just a few years ago had like $100 billion in surplus and are now 50 billion in deficit. Everything is being stretched thin, and this was an absolute failure of a policy that may never get solved now. It's too late. But if the media is going to convince you that Trump's bad, you're going to continue with this. I love this. Bronco's got the I did that with Kamala Harris. Those are the things that went through the roof under Biden. Okay? They just are. I don't know how else it could be explained. Yeah, they're out there with their fake little crime stats. They're out there saying they're going to do something about fentanyl. What have they done? They're still on the side of people who promote critical race theory, cancel culture. The world is freaking unstable. The Taliban has completely regained what they had. China is clawing its way to the top of the pile and is not coming back down. Wokeness is the number one dictating factor for things. That's why they don't have high-speed internet going into rural America, because they had to go with all their wokeness instead of just getting the job done. Illegal immigration, come on. Inflation, food prices, that's debatable how much influence they had. They didn't do anything to help it. And they covered trillions of dollars in green energy boondoggles with the Inflation Reduction Act. So, I mean, in that context, you know, they get negative points on that one. And gas prices, again, they attacked the energy sector. That's what they did. That's the evidence. And none of that stuff went through the roof under Trump. When we talk about world instability, Biden gave back Iran money. Hamas attacked on October 7th in one of the most brutal attacks we've seen in a long, long time. Hamas still holds U.S. citizens hostage. North Korea is supplying weapons to Russia in their ongoing attacks in the Ukraine. And China is more than ever exploiting slavery, exploiting Africa, getting rich off green energy while not really using green energy themselves. These are the things that happened under the Biden administration. These are the things that Trump worked to end. Trump signed peace deals with Arab nations and Israel. He figured out ways to make it work for both sides. So to get more individuals over here and to get around some of the cumbersome immigration rules that we have, and I admit they are cumbersome, we wanted to allow Ukrainians a quicker way in. So they created this parole program. And they decided, well, since we're doing it for the Ukrainians, we'll do it for the Cubans, the Haitians, the Nicaraguans, and the Venezuelans. And Venezuela dumped their whole prison over here. But gang members and scammers are using dead people's names. And the program was never staffed at the right levels. It was well-intentioned, but it was just set up for fraud. Because, like I've said before, Democrats are really good at setting up black markets. In one case, they found somebody using the passport of Michelle Obama. And all it required to enter the U.S. without a legal visa was a U.S.-based sponsor. So like I said, it started with the Ukrainians. That made sense, but this is something that was just created by Mayorkas. What the author of this article says, the iffy legal status of parole. They found a way to get him in here, but right away they knew that there were problems. And only recently did the Biden administration pause it. Of course, it has restarted, but they were told that dead people and Venezuelan gang members were applying to be sponsors. They knew this. They knew that people were selling sponsorships on social media. Think about that. My grandfather didn't get here until the 1930s. He had to set himself up and then sponsor his wife to come over here. They had to pay money. They had to go through rigorous background checks and health checks and things like that. And they're just flying these people in. And these people are using stolen information. Nearly 1,000 applications were approved with social security numbers of dead people. Thousands of applications with bogus addresses. In some cases, they were using storage lockups as addresses. And they knew this could be a problem, and they just allowed it to happen. They found in this recent audit that 3,200 people sponsored over 100,000 people. And why this matters is because a lot of these people who come here, we're talking well over 10 million people, a lot of them are getting SNAP benefits and food stamps and welfare. We barely have enough for our senior citizens and our veterans. We don't even really have enough. And now we're going to cough up more, and then we're going to ship them to cities and make those cities cough it up. Denver has a problem. I mean, come on. Think about that. Denver's not near the border. New York, L.A., San Francisco, everywhere is having to spend money on a fraud-riddled system. And that's not even including all the people that are just coming across. But the White House flat out said they didn't want stiffer checks on sponsors because they didn't want to de-incentivize people from signing up because they don't care what happens when you get here, just get here. That's their whole point. And here's another great scam that was run. When the Venezuelans and the Cubans and the Haitians realized that there was a cap of 30,000 people from those four nations, they just started registering as Ukrainians. So we literally have Venezuelans in this country right now who have come in as Ukrainians. Now, I understand that desperate people will do desperate things, but how many of those people who lied or used corrupt means to get into the country, how many of them are coming here to be worthwhile citizens? See, that's the problem. They have people who in Nicaragua for $5,000 that you'll have a support application filed on their behalf without communicating with the sponsor. So people are profiting off of our immigration crisis. Meanwhile, we're just packing our country with people who may or may not have ideals and morals that align with the rest of our country. And we see these culture clashes. We see it in Michigan, where the Muslim town leaders took down pride flags. We see it as people move into neighborhoods, and like we see in Ohio, where they're not quite the best drivers, or they come from places that have lax driving laws, if no driving laws at all. And it's just a clash because it was so many people. So many people. They found that some of the sponsors were actually here under the same program, or they were just illegal immigrants under this temporary protected status. Because we just believe everybody who comes to the border. So we have people who are speaking French and are black and obviously Haitian, saying that they're Ukrainians, and it's welcome on board. Come on over. We'll find a place for you. We have our own problems, and we're literally importing our problems. Crime is at the top of everybody's list, and we're importing criminals. And that's not to say every single one of them is a criminal. Of course not. But at the numbers you're talking about, even if 10% of them are, that's still over 1 million. And we really don't need all that, do we? Speaking of things we don't need, this is one of the things that drives me crazy about the liberals. The way they create a problem and then fund themselves off of this problem. Okay? I'm all for cleaning up our act. I think Mother Nature is far more responsible for what's going on with our weird weather and our changing weather patterns. I just saw one, I'll probably cover it next week, that a chunk of the Sahara Desert is going green again. Well, I don't know if that's from us. I don't know how we would do that. But California, with all of their deficits and all of their debts, want to issue a $10 billion bond offer for climate. And like Brian Jones here kind of pointed out, imagine using your credit card to buy something, knowing that by the time you finish paying off the debt, you'll have spent nearly double the original price. It's a poor financial decision most of us would avoid. Interest. It's the way it works. You know, wow, they're going to give you 2% cash back, but they're charging you 26% interest. And this is what bonds are. It's not free money, okay? These are Wall Street loans with high interest rates. The real winners with bonds are wealthy investors, and the losers are taxpayers. Now, why this is important is what they're going to use the money for. See, we already have $79 billion in bond debt, right? So now we want $10 billion. And what do we want it for? Climate programs. That, as they say here, are vaguely defined. So the author's saying that if you're going to use bonds, they should be reserved for projects that offer lasting value, such as roads, bridges, water storage, that'll still be useful decades from now, long after the 40-year bond payments have been made. Okay? Now, infrastructure for farmers markets, pop-up tents, restrooms, and hand-washing stations. It'll fund workforce development to help mitigate unemployment, which is, of course, completely unrelated to infrastructure and climate. And to top it off, it also includes grants for exhibit galleries at zoos and museums, and even van pool vehicles for low-income workers. Those are all noble things, but that's not bond material. That's not long-term investment. That's not infrastructure. And like they say right here, those are temporary programs that will be gone before the debt is paid off. And let's look at one of their last bond measures, okay? They passed a bond measure that would provide billions of dollars specifically for water storage. Yet, since 2014, that's 10 years, they still have not built one damn thing. So we're going to give them more bond money and incur more bond debt? Oh, my goodness. And they point out right here, like I said earlier, 2 years ago, we had $100 billion in surplus. Why didn't you fund it then? But instead, all that money's gone. We had our budget plus $100 billion, and in 2 years, it's all gone. These people can't be trusted with our money. They need to start doing more with less. Because this is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Recklessly borrowing money for pet projects is not just financially irresponsible, it's a disservice to California's taxpayers. So this is bond measure Prop 4, and I strongly recommend you voting against it if I didn't make that clear. One of the places where California has wasted the most money is its homeless population, which again has increased. And they act like what they're trying to sell us is that we need more housing. The problem is that we are giving money to organizations that then distribute goods, services, and money to the homeless. They've incentivized homelessness in California. So we have people moving in. We're losing taxpayers because of Gavin Newsom's excessive taxing, but we're gaining a population of homeless people. And more, and because we've used up all of our money, there's no money to help people out. So we're constantly putting out the people who are homeless because of financial situations, not just drugs, alcohol, crazy, and all that. It is a fucking mess. And again, we now have 186,000 people living on the streets and in homeless shelters in California, despite the billions of dollars that we've spent on it. Because a lot of them are there because they want to be there. See, that's the problem. The homeless people that want to be there are the ones that the everyday citizens are worried about. The crazies, the drug addicts. And now I've got to imagine a lot of them are people who came into this country illegally. They want to make it out like people pay coyotes and they come up with all this money and $5,000 to Nicaragua for a sponsor. Yeah, a lot of them did. A lot of them just hoofed their way here and came across the border because, hey, just like the gang members, I would rather be a criminal in a well-off country. I would rather be homeless and poor in a well-off country. I mean, shit, do you think the homeless people in Nicaragua are getting free cell phones and free supplies and EBT cards and money for food and all that? And then you're just like, well, then I could go out and steal a little bit and buy my booze? I'd rather be there. That's what happens when you incentivize these things. The Democrats have incentivized homelessness, illegal immigration, and to a large degree, criminals across the board. Because when you say, look, come to California, if you get busted, you won't get deported. We're also going to look for ways to reduce your sentence. We're going to look for ways to not increase the charges against you. Why wouldn't you come to California? Just live in a tent, commit crimes, do whatever the fuck you want. Hey, it sounds good to me, right? I mean, fuck. No bills, no taxes. Everything's tax-free because it's all under the table. They have incentivized bad behavior across the board. Their supporters use racial slurs against black conservatives. Their supporters chant death to the Jews. Their supporters burn down entire cities because one guy acted a fool and ended up dead. That's the reality of what the Democrats are offering. More of that shit. More instability. And this time around, it's going to be a lady who's going to make us look foolish. And they're rushing to cover for her, instead of doing what they are paid to do, which is to uncover the truth. If Trump is such an evil person, show me the proof. If Kamala is such a good candidate, show me the proof. Because what I see is media corporations, celebrities, covering up all of Kamala Harris's warts and then putting those very same warts onto Trump with no proof and nothing to back them up. Because if the truth is not on your side, then all you got is lies. I'm King Copious, Purple State Party, and so are you. Be kind to one another and love yourself. Take care of yourself. Man, mental health is very important. I know it's a struggle every single day. And if you're struggling with it, keep your head up, man, because you can make it. I made it, so can you. You know what? When you get really sad, put on some tunes and dance it out.